It is just after midnight on August 5th, 1962. The lights are on inside a quiet Brentwood house. The phone keeps ringing. No one is answering. Inside the bedroom, Marilyn Monroe lies alone on the bed. She's naked. A phone receiver is nearby. Prescription bottles set within reach. There's no struggle, no overturned furniture, no dramatic chaos, just stillness. By the time the police arrive, the story is already forming. Within hours, the headlines are locked in. Movie star found dead. By morning, the language hardens. Probable suicide. By the next day, the narrative is complete. America wakes up stunned, but not confused, because Hollywood gives people a version they already know how to process. The press doesn't ask how a woman surrounded by doctors ended up alone with overlapping prescriptions. They don't linger on medication, isolation, or responsibility. They don't interrogate that system. They grieve her beauty. They mourn how fragile she was, and they call it tragic. Newspapers describe her as troubled, unstable, fragile beneath the glamour. Radio commentators speak softly as if volume might invite questions. Fans leave flowers and cry for the girl that they thought they knew. Hollywood closes ranks. What the public is given is a clean ending. A woman overwhelmed by fame, a star who couldn't survive herself. It's a story that comforts everyone still alive. Because if Marilyn Monroe died at her own hand, then no one failed her. No doctor, no studio, no system. And once that story is accepted, there's no need to look closer. This episode starts at her death because that's where the lie settles in. Not with a bang, but with a quiet agreement that this version is enough. I'm here to say it is not. I'm Becca, and this is Hollywood is Dead from Deadly Truths. Before the myth, before the dress, before the punchlines and the tragedy packaging, there was a woman who was far more deliberate, intelligent, and self-aware than Hollywood ever wanted to admit. Marilyn Monroe was not a happy accident. She did not wander into fame. She built herself piece by piece out of a childhood defined by instability and a system that underestimated her at every turn. Her real name was Norma Jean. She grew up without a reliable parent, without permanence, and without protection. What that creates is not weakness, it creates adaptation. She learned to read rooms. She learned what people want before they say it. You learn how to survive systems that don't care if you do. Hollywood later rewrote that childhood as proof she was broken. This was convenient, because if she was already damaged, then no one else had to take responsibility for what came later. But here's the part that gets erased. She read constantly, not tabloids, not fluff. She read literature, psychology, philosophy, acting theory. She annotated books. She studied people. She paid attention. She understood motivation and subtext, things the studio preferred their blonde icon not to notice. She trained seriously as an actress. She did not rely on charm. She left Hollywood and put herself in rooms where the work mattered, where the goal was truth, not obedience. And she was good, dangerously good. Look at Niagara, for instance. I don't know if you guys have seen that, but if you like classic movies, you need to watch it. It'll change your perspective on Marilyn. That is not ditzy. That's restraint and menace. Look at Gentlemen Prefer Blondes. Diamonds are a girl's best friend. This is one of her more famous songs. Most people who are familiar with Marilyn will know this one. This is not stupidity, it's satire. She's playing a woman playing a stereotype, and she's in control of the joke the entire time. Again, if you have not seen that actual movie, you need to watch it. Then there's How to Marry a Millionaire. Surgical comic timing. Again, classic. The 7-Year Itch, innocent performed with intention. This again, complete classic. I could go on and on about the movies that Marilyn did because unlike some other actresses from her time, this woman had legs, and I don't mean just the literal ones. And then, of course, you've got Some Like It Hot, one of the greatest comedic performances ever put on film, still today. Absolutely hilarious. Comedy is harder than drama. Marilyn knew that, and she mastered it. She also did something almost unforgivable in the 1950s world of Hollywood. She founded her own production company. That wasn't ambition, it was defiance. A woman who questions scripts, asks why her characters have no interior life, and demands better writing stops being decorative. And Hollywood does not like women who stop being decorative. So the story changed. When she prepared carefully, she was unreliable. When she questioned authority, she was difficult. When she wanted autonomy, she was called unstable. Those weren't observations, they were disciplinary labels. Hollywood needed her to be naive, because a smart woman in a sexualized body is a problem. Intelligence spreads, agency spreads, and Marilyn was learning too much too fast. The version of Marilyn most people remember, the dumb blonde, the fragile starlet, the woman who couldn't handle fame, that version is not real. It's containment. Because if audiences had seen her clearly as a sharp, ambitious, self-aware woman navigating power, then the system around her would have been exposed much earlier. And Hollywood has always been better at selling a lie than surviving the truth. That's who Marilyn Monroe really was, not a cautionary tale, a threat. And that's why the myth had to be louder than the woman. Here's the moment the relationship broke. Not when she was late to set, not when she struggled with sleep, not when the headlines started whispering, difficult. It broke when Marilyn Monroe stopped being compliant. Hollywood can tolerate chaos, it cannot tolerate defiance. As long as Marilyn showed up smiling, hit the marks, and played the blonde exactly as written, the machine protected her. But the second she started asking why the script was thin, why her character had no inner life, that was something she actually asked, why men with worse behavior were being indulged, the tone changed. Studios don't want to argue with women like Marilyn. When she wanted more control over her roles, she wasn't called ambitious, she was called unstable. When she took acting seriously, trained seriously, and slowed down to do the work right, that wasn't professionalism, it was called unreliable. When she formed her own production company, that wasn't entrepreneurship, it was ignorance. Those labels weren't descriptive, they were punitive. This is how the industry disciplines women who step out of line. It reframes resistance as illness. Male co-stars, they could drink, disappear, scream at crew members, blow schedules, assault women, and still be called temperamental, brilliant, or a tortured genius. Marilyn Monroe showed up with anxiety or insisted on better conditions, and suddenly she was a liability, a problem, a risk. And once the label sticks, everything else follows. Doctors stop answering to the patient. They start answering to the studio. Medication becomes management, not healing, scheduling. Sleep when told, wake when told, perform when told, smile when told. If her body resisted, the dosage went up. If her mind resisted, the blame shifted to her psychology, not the environment poisoning her. Isolation followed. Access was filtered. Friends were rotated out. Information was controlled. The goal was not care, it was compliance. And here is the part Hollywood never wants to examine. If Marilyn had been truly incompetent, truly unstable, truly incapable, she would have been discarded quietly. Instead, she was managed aggressively. Let's face it, anytime starlet, so to speak, was actually incompetent, unstable, and truly incapable, Hollywood has never had an issue kicking that person to the curb. But they kept Marilyn around. What does that tell you? Because she still had power, cultural power, sexual power, box office power, and power in a woman who is not obedient is dangerous. So the industry did what it always does when a woman refuses the script. It rewrote her behavior as pathology, it reframed her intelligence as instability, and it turned resistance into diagnosis. By the time she died, the public had already been trained to accept one conclusion, that whatever happened, it was her fault. That did not happen overnight. It was built, decision by decision, label by label, prescription by prescription. And once that narrative was set, the ending didn't need to be questioned. So now let's talk about how medication replaced care and why that made tragedy not possible but predictable. This is where the system stopped pretending. By the late 1950s, Marilyn Monroe wasn't being cared for, she was being managed, right? And Hollywood likes to talk about her mental health struggles as if they existed in a vacuum. They did not. What she was experiencing was the predictable result of an industry that refused to slow down and chose chemistry instead. Barbiturates and amphetamines weren't treatment. They were scheduling tools. You can see this too with someone like Elvis Presley. When Marilyn couldn't sleep after long shoots, constant scrutiny and pressure that never shut off, the answer was not rest, it was pills, heavy sedatives to knock her out, regardless of whether her nervous system was ready. Natural sleep was overridden. And then when she couldn't wake up the next morning because sedatives don't magically disappear, she was given stimulants, amphetamines to force alertness, suppress appetite, sharpen focus, and get her on the set looking alive. Down then up, night after night, set after set. This was not accidental. It aligned perfectly with production needs. Sleep when told, wake when told, perform on command, smile on cue. When her body started to resist, when tolerance built up, when anxiety spiked, when memory slipped, the response was not to stop the medication cycle. The response was more medication. Different doctors, overlapping prescriptions, no single person responsible. And that matters because once multiple physicians are involved, accountability dissolves. Everyone can say, that wasn't my prescription. And while they passed the responsibility around, Marilyn was left trying to manage a chemically dysregulated body that no longer knew how to function on its own. This is the part people misread as a weakness. What they call instability was actually withdrawal, rebound anxiety, and exhaustion. Predictable physiological responses that anyone would experience under that regimen. But Hollywood reframed those symptoms as proof that she was the problem, not the environment breaking her down. Medication replaced boundaries, pills replaced rest, sedation replaced consent. And once that line is crossed, the end is no longer mysterious. By the time Marilyn died, sleep without drugs was nearly impossible. Waking without stimulants was nearly impossible. Judgment was impaired, not because she was reckless, but because her nervous system had been pushed past regulation for years. This was not a single bad night. It was a long-term pharmaceutical mismanagement dressed up as care. Hollywood did not misunderstand what was happening to her. It understood and decided keeping her functional mattered more than keeping her well. And when that system finally stepped back, it left a woman whose body had been trained to survive only through chemistry. But that's not all, folks. There's also isolation and why that made this ending inevitable. By the time Marilyn Monroe was unraveling publicly, she was already alone privately, and this was not accidental. Marilyn Monroe wasn't just struggling, she was isolated systematically and deliberately by the same structures claiming to protect her. Hollywood learned something early. You don't need to silence a woman outright if you can control her access to other people. Handlers filtered who she could see. Calls were screened. Visits were discouraged. Friends who asked too many questions were labeled bad influences. Isolation was framed as stability. Doctors did not operate independently. They existed inside a studio ecosystem where keeping Marilyn functional mattered more than advocating for her long-term health. When treatment decisions are shaped by production schedules and contracts, medicine stops being neutral. And once she was labeled unstable, her credibility vanished. Anyone who raised concerns could be dismissed as emotional, opportunistic, or disruptive. Anyone who pushed for real intervention was quietly edged out. What remained was a shrinking circle of people whose livelihoods depended on Marilyn continuing to perform, not on her being okay. That's not care, that's containment. Isolation works because it creates dependence. When a person has no consistent advocate, no single doctor in charge, no peer reality check, they start to doubt their own instincts. Marilyn began relying on the very people managing her decline because there was no one else to lean on. And here's the cruel feedback loop. The more isolated she became, the more unstable she appeared, and then therefore, more control was justified. It's a closed system. Isolation creates symptoms. Symptoms justify more isolation. By the time she died, Marilyn was surrounded by professionals, but starved of protection. Monitored, but not supported. Managed, but not defended. Hollywood didn't abandon her at the end. It made sure she was alone long before the end came. And once a person is isolated enough, even catastrophic outcomes can be written off as inevitable. I'm not going to name names here because I don't need to. The record itself shows what happened. What matters isn't personalities, it's a process. And the process is visible if you know what to look for. One of the clearest red flags is this: Marilyn did not have one primary physician with full oversight. Instead, prescriptions came from multiple doctors, medications overlapped in class and in effect. No consolidated treatment plan existed. That's not speculation. It's reflected in prescription records. In modern medicine, this is recognized as a classic setup for harm. Even in the 1950s, it violated emerging standards of care. The absence of a single medical decision maker is proof of removal, not care. In the years leading up to her death, visitors were increasingly limited. Spontaneous social contact was declined and communication routes narrowed. This isn't gossip. It's visible in correspondence gaps, witness timelines, and the sudden absence of previously regular contacts. Isolation was not sudden. It was step by step. That's how systems do it, quietly, plausibly, and always for her own good. As her circle narrowed, one thing increased: paid presence. She had handlers, staff, and medical professionals, people who were contractually tied to her availability. To make it clearer, the people that were around her were people who were given money to keep her functional. And then there's the absence of escalation despite visible risk. And again, it's documented. This is the most damning proof. She had repeated hospitalizations, known sleep disruption, escalating medication use, and clear functional impairment. Yet, there was no involuntary hold, no consolidated intervention, no enforced rest period, no suspension of access to prescriptions. In any other context, this would have triggered escalation. Here, it triggered containment. That's not oversight failure. That's institutional choice. The toxicology report is not complete. And why does it matter? We don't need a villain for this story. What we have is a system where authority fragmented, responsibility evaporated, and outcomes, well, they're reframed as inevitability. Marilyn Monroe wasn't abandoned in one moment. What she was left vulnerable on a regular basis. And when protection disappears slowly enough, the ending looks natural even when it isn't. There will always be a lot of people who say, well, Marilyn Monroe, she isolated herself. She drugged herself. But I think it's important to understand that Marilyn Monroe did not wake up one day and decide to slowly dismantle her own life.